Hello, Insomniacs, and welcome to another episode of Hello Insomnia. I am your host for today. My name is Steven, and with me, as always, we got the lovely Christy.
Hey, everyone.
We got the awesome Galen.
Hey, how's it going?
And today, we are going to be talking about the topic of changelings. Now, have you guys heard about changelings before?
A little bit.
I watched a movie once with Angelina Jolie.
That is a different type of changeling.
Damn. No, I have not.
When I was doing my research, that came up a lot when you just try to Google changeling. So that is pretty funny.
Oh man, that's hilarious. Yeah, no, I before recording this earlier, I woke up and I went down a little rabbit hole on YouTube to kind of see what we were talking about here, and yeah, it's pretty wild stuff.
Yeah, it's definitely a bigger story than I thought.
Same,
because there's a lot of shit that happens with this stuff. Okay, so I mean. Now that we got that out of the way, I guess we can just jump right into our introduction. So
let's do it.
Basically, what we're going to be doing is just kind of going over like some of the history and folklore, like a brief one, and then I'm going to give you basically examples of changeling accusations, I guess, throughout history that I found here. So we'll go ahead and get right into it. Let's get a little bit creepy. Imagine you're a parent in the Middle Ages. Right? You're looking at your child or your baby like you usually do. Only something feels different about them. Your child is different somehow. You can't quite figure it out. Maybe they look slightly different, or they're abnormally sized. They have abnormally sized body parts or facial features. Perhaps they look a little sickly or show signs of different personality traits than they used to, such as anger. No, this can't be your child. They must have been switched with an imposter, or maybe they've been switched with a changeling. So throughout history, in many different cultures around Europe, there are stories of fey creatures. From Germany to Poland to Ireland to Scandinavia, the folklore surrounding these creatures are very similar. Sometime during the night, a fey creature known as a changeling will sneak into the homes of unsuspecting parents and kidnap their child or children and swap them out with one of their own. It is only assumed that the mortal child is taken back to the realm of the fairies to be raised or put to work, while the creature left behind usually sickens and dies. Though some may live into adulthood. So some of these creatures may live normal lives in our realm.
Okay, I've got a question here. So you're saying these changelings, so the creature they swap with is it their offspring or something? Like they're basically giving this creature to the families that's going to die?
Yeah, so what it is like the fey creature sneaks into these houses, switch out a healthy human baby, replaces that with either a old fairy creature that's like gonna live its final days in the human world in comfort, being taken care of and stuff like that, and then it'll pass on, which we suspect is like, you know, your newborn baby dies of like just random illnesses and things like that, like SIDS or something, you know what I mean? But really, it's been swapped out with a very old fey creature, the changeling.
Oh.
Yeah, it's super weird because it's like it's in some cases there's two. I actually read two different sources where they either kidnap children and take them to the fairy world, and in place they do the old sickly fairy, baby fairies, or even a tree stump that was
Yeah.
enchanted. So like there could be a piece of wood there, and you'd be like, "It's a baby, it's my baby," and then they'd also like kidnap mothers,
Yeah, so
as well.
basically, the adults, it's not just children, but children are more, I guess, susceptible to it because they're weaker than an adult. It's it's harder to kidnap an adult than it is a child. Uh, but I mean, don't kidnap anybody, people. That's just for the record.
Yeah.
Don't abduct them. They're not
But
yours.
that's behind the lore. So like, it's very similar in a lot of these different countries and cultures. But it's basically the same. The fairies come in, swap out one of ours for one of theirs, and again, yeah, some of them live to be full blown adults, and then they pass.
Some of them don't even age either, like Benjamin Button.
What do they do with the ones they steal? Are they eating them? Is it like slave labor?
So from what I read, it's because they want the fairies thought the human children were so beautiful that they wanted to take them and raise the human babies as their own, and
Oh,
they wanted a sense of like everyone being united with all the fairies and the humans being united. And it's even some believe that the fairies made like a pact with the devil, and like require a sacrifice every 7 years. So it's like it could go either way there. But that's
It
from what I
it
read.
definitely changes from culture to culture in like that aspect. Like, there's a lot of speculation whether or not it's for labor or if it's just out of love, like the obsession. Like, this fairy is just in love with this child, so they
Yeah.
take, not like in a weird creepy way, but like I want to
in a
raise this
weird
child as
grooming
my
way.
own type of thing.
And they would, for like the mothers, the purpose on that one is usually like new mothers who just had newborn like babies, and they wanted the fae pretty much needed the human breast milk for their babies. So they do like a swip spot from one world to another to help kind of raise and care for
Yeah,
the fae children. So
yeah,
that's why
because
they're
there's even
taking the mothers.
some
Got
reports
it.
of like a possible switchback when like the if the fey creature that is swapped with is sickly and uses like the mother's breast milk to get the nutrients it needs to come back, like be healthier, then later on in life they'll like the changeling will switch back with the human. And what a trip that would be if like you're like, I've been gone for
I was gonna say,
years.
how would it
Yeah.
like? I feel like those humans are the ones that end up in like
You know
insane
what?
asylums
And it could
afterwards.
have been like, would you honestly like think about it now? Like, if somebody was like, hey guys, you guys been hanging, if it was Aaron, right? It's like, we've been hanging out with a fairy Aaron instead of actual Aaron. And it's just, we never knew. But he comes back and he's just psychotic because we're like, this is not the same guy. And stuff like that happens.
And it's crazy too, because like some changelings, when they do like kind of like if there is ever that change back, like they don't even know that they are fairies, or sorry, if some changelings don't even know that they are fairies, while others like do remember and can use that influence for like evil deeds they read or something like that. And yeah, that's kind of crazy.
Yeah. I mean, there's also reports that like it's mischievous. So like, it's also that changelings typically bring misfortune to homes that they're placed in. So
Hmm.
like you hear reports of like they switched, but now everybody in that household either falls below poverty level and stuff like that, and their lives just kind of start tanking. And then that's like we get the mischievous type of fairy, and people like to blame the fairies, misfortune on the
So they're
fairies.
stealing people, pranking the shit out of them. It's kind of like bullying people. What the fuck?
Yeah. Well, there may be some reasons behind that, and we'll hopefully get into that in this one. Uh,
What is a changing though? Like what
well,
is it?
changelings are usually described as a fairy child that may appear sickly, won't grow in size like a normal child, and may have notable physical characteristics such as a long beard and long teeth. So if you have a child that has a beard or long teeth, you should be very weary because it's a changeling.
Damn, I would have been screwed as a kid because my teeth were
Well,
going every
I've
which
heard
way.
reports of kids being born with teeth. Like that is,
It's really like unnerving to see those babies with like a full set of chompers. Like
yeah.
it just feels off.
Yeah,
Oh my
changing.
goodness. Yeah, it's a thing like that happens to children. They might also display intelligence far beyond their apparent years. So, all those geniuses out there, you might be a changeling. All right, just throwing that out there. Um, as well as they might process or possess an uncanny insight. Um, a common way for a changeling to identify itself, though, is displaying unusual behavior when it thinks it's alone. So a changeling is able to fully imitate the appearance of a child it replaces, um, just as it starts to exhibit some more mental or physical deformities at a certain point. So they may look normal, but like as they get older or grow throughout the years, they might start to develop physical or mental deformities. So like changes in personality, that's where that stuff comes in. I would say maybe it's like a disease or a disability. You know what I mean? Just going with common knowledge for from this time.
Yeah,
It almost feels like people came up with changelings because they can't deal with their kids having like genetic mutations that aren't physically appealing. Like that's just the vibe I'm getting from
yeah.
this.
If you weren't like the set standard, I feel like as weird and bad as that is to kind of say, like even if you in like the Celtic lore, like specifically, if you were left-handed, you were considered a possible tell like changeling. If you had unusual birthmarks, you were a changeling. If you had no appetite or if you were overly hungry, you were a changeling. So it's like even and like this is a weird one I read is if you're uneasy or afraid of iron. I don't know how many of you guys have that fear, but you're changing.
Yeah, well, I think iron has like a what is it, like a purity to it because it's from the earth type of thing. So it's nature. So like in like some like supernatural and folklore and stuff like that, like iron is pretty pure and can defeat said either evils or unnatural creatures. But yeah, no. So like those natural disabilities and stuff, like modern medicine, we know like that's you know that's just things that can happen to children or adults growing throughout the years. Like we everybody gets different mental disabilities, or if you're a perfect person, you're fine and nothing's wrong with you, right? That seems a little bit more weird nowadays, but
Yeah.
like that's a thing.
I feel like this is a really easy way for people with like personal vendettas against someone else. They're like, your kid's a little sus. They're a changeling. Let's kill him.
Christy, you are actually like very close to this stuff.
It's like the
Like you're
witches.
on it.
See, it's like the whole thing. Like people are just inherently a little evil.
100% exactly what I was thinking too, dude. Like I was like, dude, this is straight up just the witch shit, but like for Celtic and Scottish times.
For children, they're like, I don't like
Yeah.
these kids. They're changelings. No, it's definitely some of that. Oh, before I forget, let's get into some of our sources. I used a lot of the Lore podcast. They had some stories on there about changelings. The Solved Murders podcast, I used them for some of their information. Of course, Wiki. Who doesn't use a good Wiki? The Shrouded Hand, I believe, is a YouTube channel, and they did one about changelings. The Horrible Truth was also a YouTube video, and Symbolage.com. That's found some good stuff on there from the changeling. All right, so let's get into the why. Why some of the fairies might switch out to humans. I mean, we kind of touched on it a little bit, but here's some more I've researched. According to the website symbolage.com, here's some reasons that a fairy might switch out a human with a changeling. Some of the fairies are said to love the children and sometimes have the urge of taking one for themselves so that they can care for the child and watch it grow. Such children would be raised as fairies and would live out their lives in the fairy realm. And we talked about that a second ago. The other stories claim that fairies love taking handsome young men as lovers or healthy boys who would become their lovers when they mature.
Fairies are coming off a little pedophile.
Yeah, the fairies presume that not only because they liked the human males, but because they wanted to strengthen their own bloodlines. So yes, some grooming there by
Yeah.
the fairies there. Just very creepy.
Real sus.
Yeah, I'm not about that life of.
This is taking a turn.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So that's that. That one's a little dark. I hope it's not anything of the sort. Um, the next one, many times a child would be swapped with the changeling as a prank. Some fairies, like the far or the oh god, this is a hard one. Uh, Dar Darfrig. I believe it's Celtic. I might be wrong on that. I didn't write what it was. The Darfrig would do this out of pure mischievousness and no other reason. So basically, you're just being a dick. This is what it is.
It's like,
Just
haha,
one
I stole
fucked
your
up
kid.
prank, dude.
Yeah,
Yeah.
the Fardarig is a fairy of Irish mythology. There it goes. I did read it. The name of the Fardarig is Anglophone pronunciation of the Irish word fear in drag, meaning the red man, as the Fardrag is said to wear a red coat and cap. I've actually heard of I've heard of this before. Still can't pronounce it. So please forgive me, my Irish listeners, that I botched that whole name.
Oh, Shishai, how could you?
And then forgive Galen for what he just attempted. Often the changeling would be in place of the child's stead, not so much because of other fairies wanting the human child, but because the older fairy changeling wanted to spend the rest of its life in the care of a human family. So they basically, we're the caretakers of old changelings.
Honestly, that's kind of smart. Like sometimes I think like if I were to be reincarnated, I want to be like a rich person's dog. So like changelings are just doing that equivalent of like I want to live my best life. I want to be like taken care of as I die, and that's like can't fault them for it.
Holy shit,
True.
Christy, that is something I've never thought about. But
Right?
now it's like on my list, like, oh my God, that would be amazing.
Yeah, just pampered and they're taking care of you,
Oh,
and like
God.
you just live out your last days living your best life.
Oh my God, like that would be the life, right? Just I'm just some rich
That's
person's dog.
hilarious.
Oh man. Another reason the swap sometimes is made is that fairies have observed a human family and concluded that the child is not well taken care of. And because of this, they take the child and give it a better life and give the family an old mischievous changeling instead. So it's a punishment. They're like
Very CPS over
like
here.
you can't take care of your child. So fuck you guys. Let's swap it out with old Jeffrey Farrington, and he's an asshole, so he's gonna ruin your life.
So like elder abuse, but CPS at the same time.
Yeah.
So
it's like fuck this family.
just the psychology of like the changelings. It's like, we don't like our elders anymore. They're no longer useful. Let's steal these children who are being neglected.
Yeah.
Like kind of a little good, kind of a little evil there.
I mean, we're basically Florida to the changelings. You know what I mean? They send their old over there to the Florida, and just like here,
Oh,
the
God.
human realm, take that.
The human realm. You didn't do the dishes. Off to the human realm.
Off to the
for you.
human
We're
realm
getting
for you.
a better kid.
Oh my God, yeah, that's how they do it. But anyway, so we talked about some of the reasons why. Let's get into some of the methods and how to get rid of a changeling or help identify a changeling. So there are several different methods in getting rid of a changeling. Most of the methods are very violent, cruel abuse in modern times, but back then they could be deemed acceptable or justified. So just keep that in mind, that some of these methods are very cruel and have a lot to do with abuse. So just be warned.
People being people.
Yeah. Humans not so great. Fairies can be dicks, but so far it's not a lot of torture. yeah, parents could try to beat the false baby. Let me say that back one more time. The parents could try to beat the false baby. Apparently, its cries of suffering would summon the fairies back to rescue their family and return the human child.
I feel like this is just being like, oh, my child is a changeling. It's just a cover story. Like, the whole I walked into a door thing for domestic abuse. Now it's like, oh, yeah, I thought they were a changeling. And I'm just like,
Yeah.
enough people thought this was a valid excuse.
So, and this is folklore and stuff like that. So this goes back for generations and generations. So like all like folklore just builds, and this is what people think is an actual thing. Like you think that this exists, and it becomes like, oh no, I'm doing the right thing by beating this child, this baby. You know what I mean? Like I'm not a monster. That's a monster. You in your head, you convince yourself that you're the good guy, and that's the danger for this whole situation.
Yeah.
Yeah. Whew,
My lord.
all right. So the next method: bathing a suspected child with water that has been boiled with foxgloves. The
What?
the flower was thought to repel changelings. Foxglove is poisonous to humans, uh, potentially resulting in the child's death, which in turn could lead the parents into believing the child was in fact a changeling and not their real child, uh, and that the real child could potentially return to the Fey realm.
What the heck?
So let's poison a child with this poisonous flower, and then our child will come running out of the Fey realm back to us. So that's what I'm saying. Like they convince themselves that this is the right thing to do, when really they're just poisoning their own children or elderly.
That is pretty messed up.
Yeah. Uh, other forms of violence are also prescribed, like drowning them, leaving them alone in the woods to be taken by their fairy family, or eaten by wolves.
Holy shit.
So abandonment, you know what I mean? And drowning, straight up murder. Like that's um, treating or threatening to scald it with a hot poker. So
Those iron tongs
those
coming back.
iron, and like I don't know about you guys, but like the
Damn.
modern hot poker has got the little like uh, pointy end with the hook on it. So I can only imagine like way back when it's probably very sharp and very very hot, just sitting in a fireplace.
Yeah.
Holy
shit.
This other one's kind of weird. Boiling it in soup, in a soup pot. So you're gonna boil
Baby soup
in a soup pot. So not necessarily in soup, which I think would be a little bit funnier. Not to say boiling a child is funny, but
please don't eat your children.
But so I'm just because I'm imagining just a giant cauldron and then them just putting a child in the.
I can see them saying, "Oh, we thought they were a changeling, so we thought we'd just eat the child."
Yeah, some chicken noodle soup.
Shit,
here.
guys. I was gonna have chowder for dinner, but never mind.
Now I'm gonna have child for dinner.
No, I'm gonna have a salad.
The least aggressive of methods of getting a changeling out was to make it reveal its own name or age. So my interpretation of this is yelling at the damn thing, or excuse me, yelling at the child until it says, yeah, my name is the Fardag or whatever. You know what I mean? Like actually revealing its own name, which I personally have never read of a example or a case where this was effective. So I can only imagine that this is the stipulations people were going off of, but it never worked. I'm almost certain this never worked.
So like, were Christians doing this? Because there's Christians at that time too, and since it was Celtic times, so it's like, were they following this protocol as well?
Well, you had a lot of like of both, because this is just superstition. You can be religious and still believe in these type of folklore things because it's been around for many of generations. So if
Yeah.
something usually survives that long, like folklore wise, you know what I mean, it there's people think that there's a bit of truth, especially way back when. Like now we kind of just look at it as folklore, and maybe there may have been something a long time ago, but not
Hmm.
now. Like nobody believes in any of this stuff unless I mean, I don't know.
Yeah, because some of the videos I saw, it was like, YouTube videos. So it was like the nicer ways to deal with this. But it was definitely like you could tell is from like no hate or anything, but a Christian lens. And it was like, keep an open Bible around the cradle, pillow, or during childbirth for the mom, just make sure one's present, and it was stuff like that. So I'm just curious, like, I'm curious if like, Catholics and Christians, since that they were present, at that time period, and where this lore was happening, like if they followed this.
I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if maybe it had a little bit of like influence over it. So like, if you have Catholic or Christian beliefs and you're suspecting that your child's not right, obviously, like something with magic would be deemed, evil because a lot of times back then, anything different or magic that would go against like the word of God or the word of the Bible or something was deemed evil. Hence, like witchcraft and stuff like that.
Yeah, because like also when you mentioned like the changelings get swapped out for like kids and women, but like are they getting swapped out for men, or are these just justifications for abuse against certain demographics and not
Yeah.
men, which is really common in Christianity?
Well,
Yeah.
the men were getting swapped out too because there was the I guess reasons when they were saying that they would basically use them as lovers, or
Yeah,
raise
but that
them
was when they
into.
were grooming the kids, so they're still taking children versus like adult men, or do they also steal adult men?
No, I believe they do. They do too. There was a little bit of reports saying they would take some human men that they I guess grew infatuated with. So
So there are like documented changeling victim cases.
um yes, there's definitely, and we're actually about to get into that right now. There's some victim cases that I've researched. I kept them a little short. I didn't want to get too much into the nitty gritty of some of them because some of them can be a little graphic. So again, just forewarning, just based off the stuff we were talking about. So
I mean, we were already talking about boiling babies.
yeah,
How much worse is this going to
There's the
get?
disclaimer.
well, I said it in the other one. So I mean, if you've been following us now, it's pretty bad. And I only laugh because it's my way of dealing. It's my way of dealing with it.
It's called gallows humor, and it's called a coping mechanism.
Yes, yeah, exactly. It's my coping mechanism. All right. So this first case is the case of Mary Ann Kelly. Um, in 1850, in God, why do I get these hard names? I do this to myself too much. Excuse me, Ireland. It's Ruscria, Ruscara. I'm probably butchering that very bad. Ireland. Parents of a 6-year-old Mary Ann Kelly became convinced after speaking with a fairy doctor, Bridget Peters, that
Fairy
their
doctor.
child, yeah, actually, if you need to know what a fairy doctor is, I have it over here in my other notes. Fairy doctors are generally female old women, especially ones considered to have a particular mystic and supernatural power. They
Shit.
cure,
Okay.
uh, they can cure Shifi. I don't know what that word is. With charms, incantations, transmit, and tradition through many generations, by herbs and surprising knowledge. So they basically like a regular doctor for supernatural things. So they'll probably like give you like some type of weird concoction for you to drink, to change the
Like
baby
a
back.
shaman type person.
Exactly,
Yeah,
exactly.
Got it.
So
that's pretty cool.
like the foxglove method, that would be prescribed by a fairy doctor and stuff like that. Um, which speaking of, so Bridget Peters, they went to this fairy doctor named Bridget Peters. That their child wasn't their child, and since birth, Mary had suffered with a softening of the brain and partial paralysis. Um, she seemed to be getting worse day by day, and the fairy doctor prescribed her a concoction of foxglove, herbena, which is the foxglove flower, um, the poisonous one that we talked about earlier, and milk. Needless to say, the concoction was not effective in driving out the changeling, and Mary's condition worsened. Mary's Mary's parents took it as a sign that the creature was weakening and they needed to continue to the next step. The next step was to strip Mary naked, lie her down on an iron shovel outside in the cold weather.
What the fuck?
For several days, Mary was subjected to this treatment. After 6 nights of the cold weather conditions and being forced to drink milk with poison, Mary passed away from hypothermia and foxglove poisoning. The jury found Bridget Peters guilty of witchcraft September 13th, 1850, uh, because they murdered a child. Yeah. So it gets pretty bad. That's really bad. That's probably one of the worst ones. Um, but there's more like that, guys. So just bear with me. Um, the next case is John Nell. In 1863, before coming to this country from Ireland, Mary Nell was taught the common superstition of her country that whenever fairies frequented a house, it was presumptive evidence that some child in the family may have been changed for another while in its cradle. And the true way to test the matter was to heat a shovel, again with the shovel, red hot, and then make
Why shovels?
the iron. I'm assuming the iron on the
Yeah,
shovel.
probably the iron.
Oh.
It has to be the iron.
Yeah. Heat the shovel red hot, and then make the child sit upon it. If the fairy child, if it were a fairy child or one not belonging to the mother, it would fly away. But uh, if it remained was her own child, the mother says she, oh, if the child remained on the shovel, it was the actual child. That's I confused myself for a second. The mother says that she made this test by heating the shovel until it was red hot, and then sat the child upon it. The results of the child was burned so badly that it died about a week afterwards. The deceased son's name was John, and he was 3 or 5 years old, depending on which newspaper reported the story. Mary Nell was sent to the insane asylum on Blackwell Island.
Jesus.
Uh,
I can't imagine that.
yeah.
Wow. Sitting on
So,
a red
like,
hot shovel. Oof.
and was that prescribed by like? Because if she ends up in the mental asylum, things like that, does that mean that they don't find it a valid cure and it's not a changeling, or is it like, hey, guess what? That was your kid and they died, and now it's abuse instead of trying to test for a changeling?
Well, I believe this story. I could be mistaken, but I believe this story took place in New York.
Okay.
Hold on one second. I mean, I guess I could just Google Blackwell's Island. I want to say that was New York.
Is that where she like passed away at?
Well, that's where the asylum was. Yeah, New York. So because she moved from Ireland to New York City, and she had the knowledge of of the superstition of changelings and stuff like that. And I believe she was like a caretaker or like a nanny basically, and she suspected that one of the children wasn't who they say they were, and she did this to one of the children, and the child died, which was John Nell.
That's
Damn.
insanity.
Yeah. What the next case? Yeah, it's the last one for this part. Uh, Walter Trevlin. I hope I'm saying his name right. Walter Trevlin of Penzance. On Monday, July 10th, 1843, the local magistrate and residents heard of how the upper middle class Trevlins had routinely tortured Walter, now at the age of 2 and 9 months, for at least a year at their Georgian house and orchard. This came from a newspaper article too, so if it sounds like that. Servants and visitors testified that Walter had been kept without food or water for hours. He had been left outside in a tree during the winter and been made to lie face down on the gravel walk and kicked over a slope in his baby carriage by his father. Uh, and tied upside down in a tree. He was upside down in a tree until he was blue in the face. And after the miseries of the day, Walter was put to bed on a mattress filled with corks. At least he should gain any comfort in the few exhausting hours of the night. His parents suspected Walter of being switched out as a baby. The local magistrate were essentially convinced to spare the powerful family. We were unanimous in our opinion that the child had been mostly cruel and shamefully treated, but there's no sufficient evidence that could connect Mr. Trevlin and the ill usage for us to send the case to a higher tribunal.
What the fuck?
Yeah, wow.
The victim of being accused of being a changeling. Oh, sorry. Yeah. So that's the next part. Sorry. Yeah. So that family was like a rich family that got away with basically killing this child. He did, I believe, end up passing away from some of the treatments. But yeah, the family got no punishment because they couldn't tie anything to them, because it was just like he said, she said with the
Damn.
servants. They had, I'm assuming, power uh, with the magistrate and stuff like that. And it was just like nothing kind of nothing came from the torture of this child. Yeah. Um, so the victim of an accused being a changeling is Bridget Cleary, which is a very intense story, and we'll probably pick that up in another episode. So stay tuned for part 2 of Bridget Cleary and the Changeling.
Yeah, that story is. Whew,
A little intense.
that
Yeah,
one's a little intense.
yeah, uh, yeah. That the Bridget Cleary story is definitely a huge one. So I kind of want to go in depth with that one. It is pretty bad, just like these other ones that we went over briefly. But there's a lot to it, and it kind of stuck with me. So I definitely want to go over that one in another episode. So part 2, Bridget Cleary. Hopefully, maybe after this one, we'll see. But yeah, guys, what'd you guys think? A Changeling. Sorry to bring it down at the end, but what'd you guys think of the Changeling?
I mean, I wouldn't even say it was down at the end. I mean, we started off with boiling babies pretty early on. That was definitely like it's so infuriating how humanity comes up with these things. Like part of me is like, I want it to be a real thing because then I can just pretend humans aren't terrible. But then the part of me is like, someone came up with this as a cover story at some point in time and just justifying abuse. But it's also kind of interesting to think about the Fae folk because I've always heard about them playing pranks and entertained by humanity and going to the point of now they're kidnapping people and keeping them as pets even. And once more, goal, be reincarnated as a pet for a rich person. So it's interesting, but also kind of depresso for humanity.
Yeah.
Yeah, big time. Like, that's kind of what I'm thinking too. Is like this just kind of felt like a scapegoat. I don't know, kind of for like people who just didn't accept the people in their lives. And so this is their way of trying to be like, oh, something's not right. It must be magic, and like not just dealing with the circumstances and making a life that's comfortable for those around them. You know?
Yeah, it's definitely that. Like if you're just, born with, some like an extra toe or something, you know what I mean? Like something, it could be something so minuscule like that, or it could be, maybe you were born with an actual disease. Maybe you have, or ailment, and they would just take that and be like, no, you can't be my child, or you're something else, and they would reject it and torture these helpless children or people, and it's disgusting. And whether or not you actually believe in the fey folk or fey creatures, the changelings, anything like that, it's no excuse to torture and harm another person, another being. Yeah, yeah, and whether, I mean, I don't know. Do you guys think there may have been some truth to this at all? Like, do you think changelings may have been?
I like to keep an open mind, so I like to, some part of me likes to think that maybe this might be a thing, but I don't know. I just it's so sad for these children. But I mean, if it is a thing and they're like actually getting kidnapped, then that's sad too, So it's like I don't know. I'm keeping an open mind, but at the same time, I just feel like
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah, hopefully they're being kidnapped and they're going off to live amazing lives in the Fey Kingdom and ruling them or something like that. But
Yeah, it's very
oof.
Pan's Labyrinth in a
Yes.
way.
Oh shit. Yes, it is.
Which is a very good movie for anybody who hasn't watched it, but it's very like that. I'd hope that
Yep.
if these children were taken away, that they didn't suffer, and I hope that the people that do these harmful things are suffering. You know what I mean? Like the burn in hell, because that's some messed up stuff. And yeah, that's the changeling, guys. Very very intense. So, I mean, I don't know if you guys have anything else to add or say, but I think that's going to do it for this episode. Um, Definitely want to do a part two for the Bridget Cleary story. So,
Looking forward to the next part because
Oh yeah.
what can humanity come up with next?
Seriously, definitely looking forward to the next episode. I'm curious to hear what you got for this case because I know it's pretty wild.
yeah, yeah. Well, all right. So, for myself, Christy, and Galen, thank you all for joining us for this episode of Hello Insomnia. We hope you have a lovely day, even though we kind of brought it down, but we hope you have a lovely day.
Hope you sleep well at
And
night with all this knowledge we just shared.
Yeah, we're
yeah,
gonna be eating salads for like next week.
Oh, I'll never look
yeah.
at soup the same again.
Same, fam.
All right, everybody.
Have a good one.
Bye.
Good night.